Good afternoon. Uh, your name, your age, and what branch you served in.
Michael Gothie. I'm age 50, and I served in the United States Navy.
Thank you. What was your age when you served in the United States Navy?
I went in at 22, and I stayed in for 6 years, so I was finished at 28.
All right. Where were you born?
On the Groton sub base in Groton, Connecticut.
Understood. What was your military occupational specialty?
I was an intelligence specialist.
How long did you serve, and how many times were you deployed, and for how long?
So I served 4 years active duty, 2 years active reserve. I was forward deployed to the West Pacific for all of my active duty, and I was stationed out of Yokosuka Naval Base in Japan. It is on the inside of the Miura Peninsula in Tokyo Bay. But I was deployed for a year in the Arabian Gulf during Desert Storm, and then the rest of my tour I was involved operationally in the West Pacific. And then in my 2 years of active reserve, I was stationed at South Weymouth Naval Air Station, and I was attached to Atlantic Intelligence Command, which is based out of Norfolk, Virginia. So that's where I would do my active duty.
I guess that answered the question where were you stationed. Being in the United States Navy, were you assigned a particular ship, or were you did your assignments vary?
So for my 4 years of active duty, I was part of the ship's company, the USS Blue Ridge, in the intelligence department, but I was really only actively involved with ship's company for the first year, and for the following 3 years, I was permanently assigned to Commander U.S. Naval Forces. Commander 7th Fleet. Commander 7th Fleet is permanently embarked on the USS Blue Ridge. The Blue Ridge is the flagship for the U.S. 7th Fleet.
The Blue Ridge is part of the Blue Ridge class command ship. There are only two of those, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
I brought a picture of it.
Oh, wow.
Check it out. And I actually have some pictures from the war, too.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Hi.
That's what I worked for. That was Com 7th Fleet.
Fantastic.
And he was decorating me there for my service. This is Admiral Wright. He was the admiral that came in after Com 7th Fleet. Actually, Admiral Arthur became Chief of Naval Operations after he was at that command. And that was
There's the Blue Ridge. Yeah, you said it was shaped. You said it reminded you of a bathtub of some sort.
And that's actually a better picture. So
that's Mount Fuji,
that's
right?
Mount Fuji in the background. Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. That is a great shot.
Mount Fuji's big. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So,
My
thank
wife
you.
and I actually climbed that mountain when we lived there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, what inspired you to join the United States Armed Forces?
So my father was a graduate of the Naval Academy in 1961. My grandfather was a graduate of the Naval Academy in 1932. My father served as a weapons officer. He was a submarine commander, served during Vietnam, and my grandfather was in Cavite in the Philippines, and he was, I think, in charge of a submarine repair squadron. He actually was taken prisoner at the beginning of the war when the Japanese overran the Philippines, and he survived the Bataan Death March. But he was he was put on board one of the Japanese hell ships, the Arasan Maru, which was it was sunk by a U.S. submarine because it was unmarked. My uncle was a Navy SEAL, and my cousin Mike Beck was the commander of the USS Constitution. So I come from a really, deep Navy background. I was born on the sub base at Groton, and I had been going to college. Leo, come here. Come over here. Lay down. I had been going to college from 1984 when I graduated high school until around 1988 when I left. I had sort of run out of money for school, and I wasn't really doing that great, and so I wanted to try and do something different. And I went down to, obviously I was being encouraged by my father at that point in time to join the Navy. And so I went down and I took the ASVAB, which is the test that you take for military proficiency. And I got 100 on it, so they pretty much told me I could do anything I wanted in the military. And I picked intelligence. So, and I went to my A school for 6 months, and after that I was assigned to USN Fleet.
What inspired you to pick intelligence over any other potential career in the military?
You know, it sounded cool. You know, I had been taking I took the Defense Language Aptitude Battery. They were kind of considering me for cryptology or for intelligence, but I didn't do well on the language test. It's a really hard test, actually. It's very bizarre. And you really have to have a skill for that. You know, I think my mother was trying to tell me that I should go into the Supply Corps because it translates better to business when you get out. And I was like, you know, I just wanted to do something that was interesting. And, you know, I think intelligence is one of the hardest ratings to get into in the military. So it seemed like it would be, you know, an interesting job. And, you know, most of the other ratings, they weren't that exciting to me. So I went with intelligence.
Fair enough.
I mean, I was 22. You know, what did I know at the time? So.
So, what did you do before you volunteered?
I was in college for 4 years.
Where'd you go to college?
Clemson University. I didn't wind up getting my degree there. I actually left without my degree. I had a semester left, and I wound up finishing my college degree through the University of the State of New York while I was in the Navy through the Navy College. And I basically, you know, I couldn't take classes because I was overseas. But what I was able to do was I had 400 level classes left, and what I did was I went to the library and I found books on the subjects, and I sat and I took comprehensive challenge exams in the last 4 classes that I had, and I passed them and I got my degree. So I did that while we were in dry dock after the war.
And you majored in business, or?
I did. I got a general business degree, yeah.
Nice. What was the most important experience you had in the military? For better or worse, it can be anything.
This is probably Desert Storm. I was the senior petty officer. By the time I was there, I was an IS2 when the war started, and or I think I got promoted probably halfway through the war. I was an IS3. Sit down, sit, lay down, lay down, lay down, Leo. I was so at the time. I think this was. I think I had just finished my first year on ship's company in the USS Blue Ridge when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and I was picked to be the senior petty officer in the strike planning and battle damage assessment cell for Com 7 Fleet. When the war started, actually there were a number of carriers, one in the Red Sea and one in the Persian Gulf, and the commanders of carriers are 2-star admirals. And so they were sort of arguing on who is in charge, and the heads of the fleets are 3-star admirals. And since the Arabian Gulf is in the area of operations of 7th Fleet, Commander 7th Fleet was reassigned as Commander U.S. Naval Forces Central Command because it was a joint force with the British and the French and the Italians and everyone, right? We were all there. And so Admiral Arthur was in charge of all of the naval forces, so they renamed him. And at that time, I was assigned to become the senior petty officer for the strike planning and battle damage assessment cell for all of Desert Storm. So I had 800 targets that I was responsible for making sure the destruction of during the war, and you know that lasted about 10 months. So that was it was a really interesting time to see that, and I got to put my skills to use. So. It was pretty meaningful. It was a wake-up call. I think when I joined the Navy, I thought, this will be good. It'll be fun. I'll get to see the world. And then I found out the world's not a safe place, right? And so this country's pretty much been at war ever since then. So, it was eye-opening.
You said something about battle damage assessment. What exactly is that?
So every day, what we were flying missions off the carriers, off the airfields. Um, we had ground forces, but for the first probably 6 months of the war, we weren't using our ground forces. We were only doing aerial strikes against targets. So every day, a big document would come in called the Air Tasking Order, and the Air Tasking Order was every single mission that would fly over or into Iraq, and they were all combat missions. It was all about hitting targets. So my job, I had a lot of things that I had to do, but my job at the beginning of the day was to get that air tasking order, get it printed out, and then we would bring those targets into the strike cell, and we kept folders on every target, like just folders like these on every target that we were after. So actually, here's an example, right? I got a picture of one. So this is, well, that's not a good example of what we did. I do have, okay, so here's an example. This is a Tu-22 Badger, I think.
Yeah, tuple of Tu-22. That's what it is.
One of the things that we were trying to do all the time was to destroy their air order of battle, but they wouldn't go head to head with our pilots because they weren't good enough. And so one of my jobs was to I had monitors and terminals. I could get all sorts of intelligence, and worked very closely to another unit called the Subplot Watch in the Tactical Flag Command Center. And so and we get lots of, we had spies on the ground, right? Special forces. We would get all kinds of reporting. And then one day, this picture, well, this is actually after the fact, but one day we got imagery of 6 of these Tu-22s on the tarmac. I think it was in East Iraq. I can't remember the name of the airfield, but we scrambled on them, sent special forces in to light them up, and then we sent in A6Bs with laser guided bombs and blew them all up. And so the next day, this picture came in. So my job was to take looks, and this came from an F-14 TARPS pod off of an aircraft carrier deck, right? And that's the
it looks like the
fighting group that did it.
84th Fighter Squadron?
Yep.
Wow.
And so when this picture came in, this is an example of something that I would look to confirm that the targets were destroyed, and it would go into the folder, and then we would update the status, right? Okay, so then we used to make these things called a scorecard that the Admiral wanted every day, and it basically was a piece of paper that he had cut up into quadrants, and he would have every major mission in one quadrant, and he would keep notes on it while we were there, because a lot of times we were briefing not just local Navy, but like Norman Schwarzkopf and Colin Powell would come to the ship sometimes, and when they did, I would run the briefing theater, and they would be in the room with Admiral Arthur, and I, would run all the screens so that whatever they wanted to project up on the screen, the CIA would be there, the DIA, the JIA, all of the NATO intelligence officers. So it would be a briefing room about anywhere from 30 to 40 people would be in there. It didn't happen all the time. Probably happened 4 or 5 times. But this is what we would do is we collect, analyze, and disseminate intelligence on the targets, and there were different things, right? Like, so these are examples of French mines that were free floating in the Gulf, and when they were identified, SEAL teams, explosive ordnance disposal, would go out and cut them in 2. Some of these pictures aren't really about like what I did, but like, so here's, for example,
That's the Highway of Death.
this is Highway 1 out of Al Basra. It was wreckage all the way from Basra to Iraq because we constantly bombed it. It was the major highway from the coast up to the city, and I actually had some bigger pictures at one point. But I can't find them anymore. So these things we would use to kind of we would look through optics and try to understand, like, what are we doing to their order of battle, right? How can we kind of figure out how much we've destroyed? These are actually pictures of, I think it's the USS Tripoli. It hit one of these mines, and that's 4-inch steel. It cracked the hull in half all the way across. I think 4 sailors were killed that day. This is an example of, like, we would get pictures from different places, right? So this is a picture we were blowing up tankers when they tried to run our blockades. So this is a picture of a tanker that we destroyed. I'm not sure if I took this picture or not. I can't remember. Some of these pictures I did take. This is a ship that was off the coast of Kuwait, It was an Iraqi ship, and there were a few things that, like this ship, we couldn't sink it. I mean, like you could see, it's completely destroyed. We must have hit it 100 times. One of the things that the pilots had to do when they were coming back to the aircraft carrier deck was you don't land with munitions. Right?
You have to
It's not
jettison
safe.
everything.
So we would dump the munitions, and there were two favorite places it seemed like that they were always dumping them. On Failaka Island, which is a small island off the coast of Kuwait, or on this ship, which just wouldn't sink. Okay, and this had walleye missiles shot through the bottom of it. I was convinced it was like sitting in it concreted to the bottom.
That's crazy.
Let's see if I don't know if I have anything else that's really...
So what was life on the ship like?
That's another picture of that ship. So you see how the superstructure was
Yeah, I
all
see it.
on fire and blown?
Oh, wow. Nothing wrote took a beating.
So, you know, shipboard life's not... I really liked being at sea. I didn't always enjoy being in the Navy. So there's another example. So that's tank busting. So we would have different types of missions, right?
Those are T-55s.
We had scud hunting missions. We had tank busting missions. There were all sorts of different things that we were doing, like blowing out order of battle. This is a tank that's inside a revetment, right? So they would dig in and bury so that they could fire on us, right? This is a picture of the Aramila oil fields after Saddam Hussein blew them up. This is other tankers that we destroyed, right? And this is AAA anti-aircraft that they used to try and to bring our planes down. Here you can see as a picture of a free-floating mine, right? So we actually had... One of the things you had to do when you were an enlisted guy on the Blue Ridge around any ship was you were on mine watch, because normally when you use mines to defend a harbor, they're chained and anchored to the bottom of the ocean at varying depths, right? And they use them to keep submarines out, to keep surface ships out. But what the Iraqis did was cut all the chains and let them free float down into the ocean because they knew we weren't bringing our ships close to shore. So they went into the currents, and one of the things we had to do as enlisted people was stand watch to see if there were any mines, right? So try to alert the ship so that it wouldn't hit it.
I noticed on the last picture of the mine there was a pen.
Yeah, to show scale.
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So most of these... Okay, that's a glossy photo. The wingman of this pilot took the picture through his cockpit and actually was passed on to me. But this is a color photo of the Aramila oil fields on fire. And I don't know if you've heard of the guy, but a famous firefighter named Red Adair was hired after the war to go and put all those fires out. Which actually, John Wayne made a movie about that guy one time.
This reminds me of a photo that was taken during Desert Storm where it shows at least I think 5 F-16s and F-15s flying in formation over, it looks like the Aramila.
Probably.
Yeah.
There were a lot of pictures that were taken, pictures like... Those are Navy. That's a Navy SEAL right there. Like pictures like this, right, or like this, they're taken for almost like press for press pictures, or pictures like this. This was a flotilla that I was in. Let me see if I can find it. There's Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge is right there.
I see it.
And this is called a picket. Right, so this is the command ship, and then we're flanked by aircraft carriers, destroyers. So this is the combined U.S. 7th Fleet and the Japanese Self-Defense Forces in an exercise called Pacific, what was that called? PAC-Ax. And it was the biggest flotilla of ships put together since World War II at the time. I think it was like 1991 or 92, I think it was after the war. So pictures like this are taken, for press, right? Like here's another one. That's a press picture. Yeah. That's a press picture, right? That's the full carrier air wing in the air, flying over the top.
That's amazing. You got F-14s, you got the E2Cs, you got you see the A6s.
E2Cs are another E2Cs, RC-135s. Those are signals intelligence platforms, right? Like so they fly obliquely on the side of the battlefield, and they bring in they bring in electronic intelligence and stuff that this is Soviet Spetsnaz.
You were working? Oh wait, you probably weren't working with them, but yeah.
No, No, we weren't working with them. We'd never.
Yeah,
Worked with them.
yeah. That, I mean,
But
there
that was in
Silk War.
Vladivostok, Russia, doing
That's their easternmost seaport.
they were doing a martial arts demonstration. So
That's
the
still
Blue
pretty
Ridge
neat.
pulled into port there one time. So it was like, you know, it could be interesting to be on the ship because being the flagship for the 7th Fleet, we did a lot of port hopping, right? Because, you know, the Admiral was going to do dignitary stuff all the time. So, for example, whenever we went to Hong Kong, the ship got to pull in at the pier that the Queen Elizabeth II normally piered at because we're the 7th Fleet. And so if they weren't there, then we got that pier. Whereas most of the other, even the carriers, when they would go into Hong Kong, they had to anchor out, and you would have to take launches in and out. So it wasn't, you know, if you're gonna be on a ship, it sure doesn't hurt to be on the flagship, right?
Yeah.
But the it comes with a lot of other sort of duties that, you know, they probably don't push you on as hard on other ships. Like our passageways always had to be spit and polished, right? Like we were constantly waxing our floors and painting our walls because the intelligence department on the Blue Ridge is right at the quarterdeck, where the you know there's there were two main gangways onto Blue Ridge, but the quarterdeck is the one that all the officers would enter and leave from, and all the visiting dignitaries, and our space was like right there, so we had to. You know, always had to look right there, you know. Food was generally good. I can tell you the first 6 months I was on board Blue Ridge, and when you're an enlisted person, everybody has to do this. You have to work on the mess decks. But I was lucky enough to get the chief's mess. And if there is a best mess in a fleet, it's the chief's mess on board the USS Blue Ridge. It is the best. We used to get lobster tails, fresh fruit. Anytime we would go into the Philippines, the master chief, when I was working there, would have me go to the base, you know, get a jeep and go get all the food that he wanted, and he would give me a list, and I would go to like the depots, where they would keep the food, frozen food, and like, you know, it would be like 2 cases of lobster tails, right? 2 cases of steaks, right? 2 potatoes, everything, and then we would cook and eat, and you know, it was dirty work, but at least I got to eat good while I was there,
right.
you know, and you know there's always dirty work to do, right? And so, for example, like I wasn't always doing my rate work as an intelligence specialist. When we were in dry dock, after probably the last year I was in Japan, we went into dry dock. And I had 60 guys working for me on a firefighting division, and all we did was follow welders around, and when you start welding on a ship, invariably the walls catch on fire. And so you got to be there to put those fires out as soon as they start, because sometimes these welders are welding on the side of a bulkhead, and the other side of it is a fuel oil tank. And so you can't let fire spread destroy the ship, right? So that wasn't rate work. It was pretty dirty work. It was tough too, because a lot of your firefighters are guys who have been restricted to the ship for one reason or another. They're fighting, or you know, doing whatever. So, and that's basically the way that the military governs itself, is under the code of non-judicial punishment, which basically means you go stand in front of the old man in a process called captain's mast, and the captain tells you what's going to happen. And it usually comes down to you're restricted to the ship, you lose a stripe, and you lose pay. And so, you know, and there's a mixed bag of people, right, in the military, and not all of them are overachievers, so to speak. So it's like you really got to quickly be, you know, especially as a petty officer, the ratio of officers to enlisted men is probably 10 to 1. Okay, and so you're leading, when you're a petty officer in the military, or a non-commissioned officer like in the Army. I was the equivalent of a sergeant. You do get command, and sometimes you're in command even when there's an officer in the room. You know, and rank does not necessarily mean you're in command, right? So you really have to kind of step up to the job. It's no joke. So you grow up really quick, you know.
I see. So, how did your service in the military affect your life today?
You know, it really gave me the discipline that I needed to move on. I didn't really have it when I was in college when I first went. it taught me about accountability. When you go to boot camp, that's when it starts. Those drill sergeants get in your face, and they tell you right away, your mommy's not here to take care of you anymore. Okay, so it's you just learn that. I think the thing they drill into your head, and you realize very, very soon thereafter that you're going to be responsible and accountable for your own actions, and you're not going to blame it on anybody else. That's probably the most important thing I learned. I carry that with me today, and I actually expect it from anybody who works for me. So, I don't think I'm always, and my kids, I know I've been tough on over the years, but they, they used to say to me, Dad, you just wish we were in the Navy, and I would say, no, you are in the Navy. So they have a saying, you can take a person out of the military, but you can't take the military out of the person.
Yeah.
Right. So, what kind of advice would you give someone looking to volunteer today?
I've been asked that question a lot over the years by parents. Who want to see an outcome for their children similar to the outcome, maybe not necessarily the experience that I went through, but at least the outcome that came from it. And what I tell them is, if someone is ready to make a change in their life or to make a commitment, then the military could be the best place in the world to go. But if they're not ready to make a change and they're not really ready for it, it could be the worst thing in the world to do. Because wherever there's military bases, there is a lot of temptation, right, to do things that probably not the best way to live, right? So you really gotta go in with a desire to get something out of the experience, and if you do that, it can be great. But if you're just going there to bide your time, it's really not hard to do your time and to get an honorable discharge. The military is a great place to be from. It's not necessarily a great place to be. So you really have to know what you're getting into and recognize that it's not just fun, right? It can be fun, but fun is maybe less than 15% of the time, 20% of the time, right? You're having fun. The rest of the time you're working. Right,
Yeah.
and so it's a job like any other job, right? No, actually, it's not a job like any other job. It can be a really hard job, right? It can be really boring, right? Constant amounts of boredom, doing nothing, right? Interspersed by absolute periods of terror, okay, and fear, and you gotta deal with it. So, but I don't regret it in any way.
Fair enough. Are there any other anecdotes, personal stories you want to share, or anything really notable?
No, I had a chance to do a lot of things. I was in a number of the major oceans and the seas. I probably spent 2 years at sea. Got to go to Australia. All those things they tell you get to do. I've been to Bali, Singapore, Hong Kong, India, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. I've been in a lot of places, and I did it before I was 28 years old. So, it can be fun. You could definitely get to see the places they tell you that you can, and you definitely can do it.
That's fantastic.
So, anyway, no, I think that's it.
Yeah, I just got one quick question. So, being in the Navy, did you conduct many joint operations with other nations? I mean, you said you conducted stuff with the Italians, the French, the British during Desert Storm. Any other examples or like?
Yeah, ironically, it's hey, come here, sit down, sit, stay.
Thank you.
One thing I think I learned in life, and I learned it very early on, is when you go to a place, no matter where you are in life, you'll run into people who will say, this is the way things are. They're always going to be this way. And people were telling me when I showed up at Blue Ridge that you're never going to do anything. You're going to get 2 ribbons. That's all anybody ever gets here. We don't go anywhere. They call this place Building 19, right? Well, in the time that I was there, when I dropped out of college 6 months later, I was married, I had a baby on the way, and I was on my way to war. Okay, so, first thing is don't believe in status quo, right? From the time I stepped on Blue Ridge, um, 6 months after, probably 1 year after I was in the Navy, but it was 6 months after I had gone to Japan, I was on my way to Iraq. I spent a year there. I was on station during the first attempted disarmament of the Khmer Rouge. I did counter drug operations. That was with the Coast Guard. In Iraq, it was in our intelligence cell. I was working with the CIA every day with the CIA, with the Defense Intelligence Agency, with foreign intelligence specialists and officers, and then after that, because of the experience that I had, whenever reservists would come out, I was training reservists from all over the place, because before that, the last combat that we'd been in was Vietnam, and at scale, right? And so I was one of the most experienced guys in the Navy at the time, and I was, so yeah, we go to do these things, and you get the experience. You're gonna work with other people, and I think that it was a great experience, though. It's definitely interesting to work with other countries. I'd never really been out of the country before, at the time, and then by the time I'd gone out, I'd probably worked regularly with counterparts from 6 different countries. So
That's fantastic. Anyway, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And that's really it.